$1,180. That's what's left after everything else took its share. Not your paycheck. What's left? You're lying in bed. 2 in the morning. You open the banking app again. You just closed it 5 minutes ago. The number hasn't moved. It never does. Just because you look at it one more time. You've got student loan debt sitting quietly in the background. A credit card balance that isn't huge, but big enough that it's in your head every time you tap your card. You're not poor. At least that's what you tell yourself. But every grocery run, you're still doing math. Still putting the better olive oil back on the shelf. Still picking the cheaper brand where nobody's watching you do it. Here's what nobody tells you. That number, $1,180, isn't the problem. The problem is you were never taught how to read it. There are 9 decisions that quietly separate people who stay stuck from people who slowly build wealth. Most of them don't feel important when they happen. The first one shows up when you're 22. You get your first real paycheck, $2,100 after taxes. You do what everyone does. You check the number. You feel something close to pride. Then you close the app and forget it exists until the next one lands. 2 weeks later, like clockwork, like it always will. Nobody ever showed you a different number to look at. Your bank doesn't have a button for it. There's no tab called what you actually have. There's only checking, savings, and a red minus sign when you go under. The app was built to show you motion, money in, money out. It was never built to show you what's left standing when the motion stops. So you never learn to ask the real question. Not how much did I make? How much is still here? One night, you sit down with a notebook. Not a spreadsheet. A notebook because you don't trust yourself with a spreadsheet yet. You write down what you have. A checking account, a few $100s in savings you keep meaning to touch and don't. A student loan balance you've never said out loud to anyone. A credit card you've been avoiding looking at directly, the way you avoid a person you owe an apology to. You subtract one from the other. The number is negative. Not dramatically negative, just negative enough to sit differently in your chest than you expected. You stare at it for a while, long enough that the light through the window changes. You don't panic, that's the strange part. You just sit with it. Because for the first time, you're not looking at income. Income is the water running through your hands. It arrives, it leaves, it goes to rent and gas and the things you bought and can't quite remember buying. This number, this is what stayed behind after the water passed through. And once you see it this way, you can't unsee it. Every purchase starts with a different question. I cannot afford this. Does this move the number up or down? You don't change your spending that night. Not yet. But something in how you look at money has already shifted, quietly, without asking your permission first. Nobody puts this on a billboard, but it's true anyway. Income measures motion. Net worth measures what survives it. You're 22. The number is negative. It will not stay that way forever, but you didn't know that yet. Not really. Not until you wrote it down in a cheap notebook and looked at it directly. Maybe for the first time in your life. The paycheck will come again in 2 weeks. The question you just learned to ask will still be there when it does. The raise comes 11 months later, 8%. Around $340 extra a month, after taxes, settles their share first. You do the math twice, just to make sure it's real. It is. For a few days, you walk around with it sitting in your chest like something warm. Nothing about your rent changes. Nothing about your car changes. But something in the office changes around you, quietly, without anyone announcing it. A coworker 2 desks over starts having coffee delivered every morning. Not brewed at the office, delivered, in a paper cup with a sleeve, from a place 4 blocks away. $6 a cup. She got a raise around the same time you did. You know this because she mentioned it, the way people mention these things, half proud, half testing the room. You don't say anything. You just notice. The coffee isn't the point. The coffee was never the point. It's the small, repeatable decision underneath it, the one that quietly resets what counts as normal. This is the trap nobody warns you about. Not the big purchase. The small one that repeats. You almost start doing it too. You open the app, You look at the same delivery service, and you sit there for a minute with your thumb over the button. You close the app instead. Not out of discipline exactly, out of something closer to memory. The notebook, the negative number, the way it sat differently in your chest than you expected. You're not ready to let that number slide backward for the sake of a paper cup. The extra $340 goes somewhere else, not into anything exciting, just into the same account you started watching a few months ago. The number moves, not by much, but it moves in the direction you chose, not the direction your new salary tried to choose for you. The lesson wasn't obvious at the time. It rarely is. The first raise isn't a reward, it's a test. It arrives right when your defenses are lowest, right when you feel like you've earned something, right when spending it feels less like a decision and more like a formality. Your coworker isn't doing anything wrong. There's no villain in this story. There's just a system built to notice the exact moment your income goes up and offer you something new to spend it on before you've had time to think. You're 23. Your rent hasn't changed. Your coffee is still made at home in a chipped mug you've had since college. The first raise should not upgrade your life, it should upgrade what's underneath it. That's the whole rule. Nobody claps when you follow it. Nobody even notices. The email has been sitting unread for 3 weeks. Subject line gone gray with age, the way unread things do when you've trained yourself not to look at them. You finally open it on a Sunday night. Laptop on your knees, the kitchen light still on behind you. Credit card balance, $4,780. APR 24.99%. Minimum payment due, $118. You know this number. You built it slowly, the way most people do. A security deposit you didn't have cash for. A dentist's bill in March that insurance only covered half. A flight home for a wedding you weren't gonna miss just because the timing was bad. None of it felt reckless while it was happening. It felt like living. You do the math you've never actually done, just to see it in front of you instead of guessing. At the minimum payment, 24.99%, that balance takes almost 9 years to clear. You'll pay more in interest than the debt itself. Just for the privilege of not thinking about it sooner. You sit with that for a minute. The number doesn't feel abstract anymore. It feels like a second rent payment you agreed to without reading the lease. You think back to the notebook, the negative number from a year ago. This is what that negative number actually looked like up close. Not an idea, a rate, compounding daily, whether you're watching or not. This is the same mechanism as compounding, running in reverse. Same math, same patience. Except instead of building something for you, it's quietly taking something apart. You open a second tab, not to transfer the balance, you don't have the credit for that yet. Just to do different math. 4,780 divided by 18 months comes out to $265 a month. That's not comfortable. That means fewer takeout dinners. That means saying no to a weekend trip a friend keeps mentioning. But 18 months at that pace cost you around $600 in interest, instead of nearly $5,000. You write the number down on a sticky note. Not as motivation. Just as a fact, you don't want to lose again. There's a version of tonight where you close the laptop and let the minimum keep doing what it's been doing. Nobody would know. The card would keep working at checkout. The balance would just keep growing quietly in a place you'd trained yourself not to check. Instead, you set the payment for Friday. $265 automatic starting this week. You feel something closer to dread than relief, because that's real money leaving a paycheck that was already tight. The part that matters more than the payoff date is this: the same compounding that was about to take 9 years from you is the exact same force that will build everything that comes after this. It doesn't care which direction it's pointed. That part is entirely up to you. 3 weeks into the $265 auto pay, the pipe under your kitchen sink starts leaking. Not dramatically, just a slow drip you notice one morning, a small dark ring spreading across the cabinet floor where you keep the trash bags. You call the building's maintenance line. Nobody answers before 5. When someone finally does, they tell you it's not covered. The pipe past the shutoff valve is tenant responsibility. It's in the lease. Page 4, a line you signed without reading closely enough. A plumber comes out the next afternoon. $580, parts and labor, due before he leaves. You have $320 in savings. You had roughly that same amount 3 weeks ago too, before you started throwing every spare dollar at the credit card, because the card felt more urgent than the savings account did. You sit on the edge of your bed and do the math you should have done a month ago. 580 minus 320 is $260 you don't have. The nearest version of that money is the same card you've spent 3 weeks trying to shrink. This is the moment it stops being theoretical. All that talk about interest rates, about compounding, about discipline. It was true, but it was also just a number on a screen you could close whenever you wanted. This is a pipe that's still dripping and a plumber standing in your kitchen who wants payment before he leaves. You put $260 on the card. It's the only option in the room. Watching the charge go through, you understand something. Not from an article. Not from anyone telling you. From the actual feeling in your chest. Why are 6 months of expenses never described as a savings goal by the people who actually have it? It's described as a wall. It's the thing that was supposed to stand between you and this exact charge, and it wasn't built yet. Your monthly expenses, rent, insurance, groceries, the minimums you can't avoid, land somewhere around $2,100. 6 months of that is $12,600, a number so far from your current $320 that it should feel impossible. For a second, it does. But you're not building it this week. You're building the first $100 of it. This Friday, the same way the card payment became real, by just picking a number and a date. You open a separate account that night. Before you can talk yourself out of it, you move $50 into it, money you didn't technically have room for. It isn't the wall yet. It's the first brick. The pipe taught you something the plumber never could. An emergency isn't the moment something breaks. It's the moment you find out whether the money to handle it already exists somewhere with your name on it. Your manager pulls you into the small conference room with the broken blinds. He tells you almost apologetically that this year's raise is 3%, the same number as last year, the same number as the year before that. 58,000 becomes 59,740. You do the math before you're even back at your desk. After taxes, that's about $40 extra a month. Less than what you're already sending to the credit card every week. You sit there for a while looking at the 2 monitors your company issued you, the smaller one slightly dimmer than the other, and something starts to bother you that you can't quite name yet. Your salary has a ceiling. Not one you can see exactly. One decided somewhere above your manager in a budget meeting you'll never sit in by people who don't know your name. But the actual skill you've built, reading a shipment manifest fast, catching the errors that slip through, writing up a clean report before anyone asks for it, that skill doesn't have a ceiling on it. It only has whatever ceiling you put on it yourself. That night, you open your laptop. Not to check your balance this time. To look at freelance platforms. You put together a profile in about an hour. List the 2 systems you know cold. Forget about it for 4 days until a message comes through. A small logistics firm 2 states over, needing help reconciling shipment records, remote, evenings only. 15 files, $22 an hour. The first batch goes fine, you send the invoice, it gets paid within a week, and something in you loosens a little. The second batch is different. 3 days in, the client stops answering. No message, no explanation, nothing after the 4th day. You keep working anyway, because stopping halfway feels worse than finishing for nothing. When you finally send the invoice, the account is gone. Not suspended, deleted, like it was never there. You sit with that for one night, $240 of work, gone into a name you can't even message anymore. You almost close the freelance profile for good. Instead, the next morning, you send it to 3 more places, because one client disappearing doesn't cancel out that the work itself was real. That's when you realize something almost nobody says out loud. A job pays you for hours, a skill pays you for value. And value, unlike hours, doesn't disappear just because one client did. By the end of the month, between the raise and the files that did get paid, you've added around $300 to what used to just be a paycheck. And for the first time, that second number came from something your job title never touched. It came from something you already knew how to do, aimed somewhere your employer's budget couldn't reach. The message from the freelance client turns into a real offer 6 weeks later. No more files this time. A full role at a small company building software to automate the exact reconciliation work you've been doing by hand for 2 years. 4 people, no office. A founder who used to do your exact job before she got tired of doing it manually. She offers you $52,000, less than you make now, plus 0.75% equity, vesting over 4 years. You bring the offer home and sit with it at your kitchen table, sliding it across an empty chair as it might argue back. That's a pay cut. You already know that. It's the same thing that's kept you up since Tuesday. You don't know if this company will become something. Nobody does. That's the entire point of an offer like this. Almost nobody explains this part clearly, and it's the part that matters more than the number on the offer letter. An asymmetric bet isn't a guess dressed up as confidence. It's a trade where you can name your downside in advance. Here, the downside is about $7,000 a year in lost salary, the exact gap between what you make now and what this offer pays, for up to 4 years if the equity never turns into anything. That's a number you can survive. It's not the wall from the leaking pipe. It's not the credit card. It's a bruise, not a break. If it works, the math changes completely. If it doesn't, you're back to a paycheck. Just a smaller one for 4 years on the way there. You do a different kind of math that night, one you've never done before. 5 times your annual expenses invested is roughly the point where growth alone can carry the rest of the way without another dollar from you. At your current expenses, that number sits close to $126,000. You're nowhere near it. But for the first time, you can see the shape of a path where ownership, not another 3%, is what closes that gap in years instead of decades. You think about the wall you built after the pipe burst. The card payment is still leaving your account every month. None of that disappears if you take this job. The bet doesn't erase the ground you're standing on. It just changes what you're standing on it for. You type the acceptance email at 11:40 at night, read it twice, hit send before you can talk yourself back into safety. Not because you're certain, because you finally understand that certainty was never actually available to you. Not in the safe job either. It just felt that way because nothing had tested it yet. The equity doesn't feel real for the first 6 months. It shows up as a line in an onboarding document, a percentage next to your name, nothing you can check the way you check a bank balance. Some nights you open that document just to look at the number. Not because it changed, because looking at it is the closest thing you have to reassurance. The paycheck is smaller now. You feel it first in the small places. The wall you built after the pipe burst gets touched for the first time in a year. Just slightly. Just enough to cover a month when the gap between old salary and new salary showed up harder than you expected. You don't panic. You built the wall for exactly this. That's the only reason this month doesn't turn into an emergency. The fear doesn't disappear once you commit. It just changes shape. One kind of fear slowly shrinks your future. The other one tests it. You recover from the second kind by Thursday. The first kind you don't recover from, you just stop noticing it. Which is worse. That distinction becomes the actual skill. Not bravery, recognition. Knowing which fear is telling you something true, and which fear is just noise from an old system trying to pull you back toward the version of you that took no risks at all. A former coworker reaches out one afternoon, still at the old company, still on the 3% track. He asks how it's going, half curious, half hoping to hear it's a disaster, so his own choice feels safer in comparison. You tell him the truth. It's harder. It's also the first time you've felt like the outcome depends on something you're actually doing, instead of something decided in a room you're not in. He goes quiet for a second. The way people do when they hear something they're not ready to act on yet. Only later do you realize the rule underneath all of it, the one that took the pipe, the card, and this leap to actually learn. Certainty was never something you had. It was only something you hadn't tested yet. The old job wasn't safe. You just hadn't been asked a hard question in a while. Three years in, the company is still small, but it's not fragile anymore. The equity is still 4 years from fully vesting, but the paycheck has caught up to what you used to make and then past it. You start looking at something you never seriously considered before. Not a house. Not yet. A small rental unit 2 towns over, the kind of place that needs nothing dramatic, just paint and a working furnace and a tenant willing to sign a year. The purchase price is $142,000. You put down $28,000, most of it from the brokerage account you started feeding years ago, back when $50 a month felt like the only thing you could spare. The mortgage payment comes out to $610 a month. The unit rents for $890. You sit with the numbers for a long time before signing anything. Not from fear exactly, from memory. The same word, debt, that once meant a credit card charging you 24.99% for a wedding flight, now means something completely different, sitting in front of you. It took over a decade to actually feel this, not just understand it. Debt used for comfort disappears the moment you spend it. Debt used to acquire something stays and starts working the day after you sign. The credit card bought a flight that existed for 4 days and then was gone, while the balance kept compounding against you for years. This mortgage buys a unit that will still be standing and still producing rent, long after the loan itself is paid off. Same mechanism, same interest rate concept. Completely different direction. The first tenant moves in during a rainy week in March. The rent hits your account on the 3rd of every month, mostly untouched by your attention, quietly doing what a paycheck could never do, arriving whether you worked that day or not. After insurance, taxes, and a small maintenance reserve you set aside without being told to, you net around $200 a month from the unit, on average. Some months less, once a repair or a vacancy eats into it. It's not enough to change your life, but it's the first money you've ever earned that didn't require you to trade an hour for it. A coworker asks how you found the property. You tell her honestly, a listing of the weekend of driving out to see 3 units, a lot of math done at a kitchen table on a Tuesday night. She writes it down. You don't know if she'll do anything with it. Most people don't, not because they can't, but because the version of debt they know is the version that took 9 years to pay off a wedding flight. The only rule this level actually teaches is this. Debt isn't good or bad. It only reflects whatever it's buying. You're driving back from a supplier meeting with the founder, still your business partner now, 4 years past the vesting date, the equity long since turned into something real, when her phone lights up on the dashboard. Her father. She lets it go to voicemail, then exhales in a way that says more than the call would have. He's 70 in the spring, she says, mostly to herself. I still don't know where he keeps the will. You don't say anything at first. You're thinking about your own father, 68, still changing his own oil, still the kind of person who won't talk about money with anyone, including you. You realize, somewhere on the highway with the fields going by, that you don't know where his will is either. You don't know if he has one. That night, you open your laptop, and instead of the brokerage dashboard or the rental account, you're looking at something you've never needed to look at before. Term life insurance. Not because anything happened, because for the first time, something depends on you existing. The mortgage, the rental tenant, the equity, the wall you built, one paycheck at a time, starting when you had almost nothing to put in it. 10 to 12 times your income is the number every quote keeps repeating. A 20-year term policy, non-smoker, healthy, runs you about $31 a month, less than the freelance software subscription you paid for years ago without thinking twice. You sit with that number for a second. $31 a month is the price of making sure a bad year doesn't become a second tragedy for whoever you leave behind. You open a new tab. A basic will, through an online service, Costs under $200. One evening spent answering questions about who gets what, who decides if you can't decide for yourself. You call your father on that Sunday. Not about money exactly. More circling it, the way these conversations always start. He deflects twice, then cracks a joke about you finally needing something from him. Thought you were calling to ask me for money, he says. You laugh because it's easier than explaining you're calling about the opposite. The third time, you just ask directly. Where's the paperwork? Is there a will? Who do we call if something happens? He goes quiet for a moment. Then he tells you it's in the fireproof box in the garage, and something in his voice sounds relieved that you asked before he had to bring it up first. You hang up and sit at your kitchen table for a while. The laptop dark, the street outside, doing whatever a street does on an ordinary Sunday night. Nothing about this conversation felt like winning. It felt like maintenance. The kind nobody screenshots. The rule this level teaches has nothing to do with returns. Nobody builds a fortress and forgets to guard the gate. 14 years from that first paycheck, you sit down one evening and actually add it all up. Not out of anxiety this time. Out of the same habit that started in a notebook when you were 22. The rental unit. The equity is no longer a line in an onboarding document, but a real number with your name on it. The brokerage account that started at $50 a month and never really stopped. The debt that's gone. Replaced by debt that works for you instead of against you. You don't feel triumphant looking at it. You feel something quieter, something closer to recognition. None of it happened on one big day. There was no single decision that changed everything. There were 9 of them, spread across 14 years. Most made on ordinary nights at a kitchen table, none of them applauded, most of them invisible to everyone but you. Somewhere, that old notebook is still sitting in a drawer. You haven't needed it in years, you never threw it out either. Somewhere tonight, in a different apartment in a different city, someone is 22 years old. They're lying in bed. It's 2 in the morning. They open a banking app they just closed 5 minutes ago. The number is $1,180. They don't know yet that the number was never the problem. They don't know 9 decisions are waiting for them, spaced out over years they haven't lived yet, disguised as ordinary Tuesdays. They close the app. They go to sleep. Tomorrow the paycheck arrives, the same as it always does. The machine doesn't care who's watching. It only cares who feeds it.